Well, hello, everybody. If you're seeing this recording, then sadly it means that the Wi-Fi in my holiday destination isn't strong enough for me to appear alongside you in virtual person. But it's my 25th wedding anniversary, and so, I have to make these kind of sacrifices, sadly. But I hope that this recording will at least give you a bit of an insight into how Anglian Water works and how we are putting purpose into practice, and perhaps kind of builds on some of the things that you've heard during the conference over the last couple of days. And it is really, really great that I could be here in some form to kind of share some thinking with you. So I'm Andy Brown. I am the Chief Sustainability Officer for Anglian Water Group, and we're a water company that operates in the east of England, in the UK. But also our group of companies runs operations in other countries. We also run environmental services, a solar company, and a number of other different practices. So I work closely with our board on trying to embed purpose into the way we operate, but also kind of how we report on our kind of the delivery of purpose and our sustainability strategy and work. And spend a lot of time kind of looking at the outside world and trying to bring the best of what is out there in to the company as well. So I've got a few slides as a backdrop to kind of take you through, give you an explanation of who we are, the challenges that we face, and particularly I've kind of tried to pull out a few from a climate perspective to share with you, how we approach that in our short and longer term business planning, and then, as it says on the slide, how we're trying to put that into practice in our decision making. So I'll take you through that journey now. So I'm very conscious that you'll be attending this conference either in person or virtually from a number of different areas around the globe. So for those who don't know, we are, or Anglian Water is a water company in the east of England. It covers 14 English counties, which are all very different and very diverse with their own challenges. On the eastern part of the UK, we have much less rainfall than on the western side, about 2/3 of that average. We are quite a rural location, so 75% of the land in the region is used for agriculture, but much higher than anywhere else in the UK. We have a relatively, I think, small proportion of England's population, but we do have a number of the fastest growing areas in that region now, so Cambridge, Peterborough, Milton Keynes and Northampton. And so it's predicted that by 2043 we'll have 700,000 more people living in the area. In terms of the landscape, we're a low-lying kind of geographical area. 28% of our land is below sea level, and obviously that has particular risks of flooding, both flooding from rivers, flooding from surface water, from extreme rainfall events, but also flooding from coastal sources as well. And in the east of England, partly because of the kind of proportion of agricultural activity we have, the businesses that we find operating in that region are also particularly water intensive. So they can be very related to the agricultural industry, either kind of the direct production of agriculture or food processing and food manufacture. And actually, in comparison to the rest of the country, which uses about 1% for agricultural activities, in the east of England it's up to 10%. So trying to balance that water management across our region is, I guess, a really interesting challenge. So less water than other parts of the country, a growing population, but also quite a water intensive an area that's at risk to flooding as well. So before I get on to the kind of details of what purpose means to Anglian Water, I thought it was worth sharing just highlights of a bit of work that we've done recently to really try and understand some of those challenges in more depth. So we've been working with a number of organisations to look at, what are the challenges and what open source data is there out there that we could use to understand the implications for climate change, the implications for sustainable growth, the implications for economy and society, and the implications for nature and the environment that occur in our region. And I'll explain kind of why we're doing this in a minute and how it relates into the way that we are trying to develop our 5-year and 25-year kind of business plan horizons. So as I said, we worked with a number of different organisations and consultancies to look at what open source information, data, metrics were out there that we could bring together to try and give us a bit of an understanding about this. And really, it's to help everybody to get a kind of an agreed point of view, because absolutely what we've found in our understanding of the big risks and the big challenges that we face as a region, around the changing climate, around the growing population, is that we are unable to deliver against those challenges, to meet those challenges in isolation. So we have to work together. We have to be coming together to understand what different element can we play, what can we, what do we need to do as individual organisations or parts of society to deliver against that challenge, and what do we need to do by working together more effectively. Anyway, this is a project which ended up we called it Thriving East, and if you look at our website, you can find the full report there. But effectively what it did was helped us to really understand and rank the challenges that we faced in our region and compare those to challenges we see being faced by other regions in the UK. And as you'll see by that slide there, the Anglian region is pretty much across the board more challenged than any other region in the UK apart from London itself. So overall, kind of in 10th place out of 11 regions, and being kind of significantly challenged from the point of view of nature and the environment, strongly challenged from a climate change perspective as well, but also from an economy and society perspective, not quite so challenged and restricted in terms of sustainable growth metrics. But I guess the reason I kind of show that is to set a bit of context for us as an organisation. We have kind of firmly believed for over the last 10 years that as an organisation, we needed to stop operating in the kind of business as usual form and really start to think about what are the step changes that we need to take in order to meet these big challenges, as I've said, around climate change, around growth, but now kind of also around how society kind of interacts with us as an organisation as well. And the water companies in the United Kingdom are operated through kind of a heavily regulated process. In England and Wales, we are privatised companies, so we're not owned by the state. We are overseen by a number of different regulators, quality regulators who look after the kind of environmental needs, and predominantly that's the Environment Agency, and then an economic regulator that regulates the kind of levels of investment we can make and the prices that we can charge to our customers, kind of to kind of fund that investment that we're making. And that regulatory cycle is a 5-year cycle, so it's actually quite short term when you're thinking about some of these big changes, these big issues around resilience to climate change, water resource planning, biodiversity crisis, all of these kind of things. So alongside that 5-year regulatory plan, we also kind of stretch the horizon out through a number of different plans. We have a 25-year water resource management plan. We have a 25-year drainage water management plan as well. And we have a thing called a strategic direction statement that looks over 25 years as well, which is kind of overarching the kind of whole direction of the company. And so I wanted to just kind of flash that up because we're right in the process at the moment of completing the next 5-year plan, which will take us through to 2030. And we bring in a huge amount of information from the quality regulators and talking to our customers and to other stakeholders and understanding what we believe our infrastructure needs are. We then develop that as a plan and we submit that plan to our regulator, Ofwat, and we're in the position now just waiting for that draft determination to come back. That'll come back at some point in June. Hopefully it'll be fairly close to the plan that we've put in, and then we can move on from there. And then a final determination comes through in December, and then we are effectively implementing that plan from 2025 through to 2030. But I thought I'd flash up a couple of the kind of headlines from that plan. So by 2030, these are the things that we want to deliver, and the kind of total value of the plan that we've proposed is £9 billion. So it's £9 billion worth of investment we want to make over the next 5 years, and that's covering a range of things from effectively getting all customers that are at risk of water poverty out of that situation and fully supported. I mentioned the kind of the size of the growth we're expecting in our region, so about £476 million on developing additional resources to be able to deliver that growth over that time. Doubling our investment in environmental protection, so that would be a kind of £4 billion chunk of that overall £9 billion plan to enable nature recovery, and also planning for 2 new reservoirs. So reservoirs are something that we build, only every several generations, and what we're planning to do, and we're kind of right in the middle of consultation for those, is 2 new ones, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But also on there, achieving a 70% reduction in the amount of carbon that we produce when we're delivering projects, so our capital carbon, and again I'll touch on that in a little bit. So that's the 5-year plan. That's a lot of things that are kind of connected to our purpose, which I'll touch on shortly, included in that. But as I said, we don't just work on a 5-year cycle. That's the kind of detailed cycle, that 5 years, where we work very closely with the regulator to kind of define exactly what we're going to deliver, and we get very closely monitored on that, and we get penalised financially if we don't deliver on that. But I also mentioned that we need to look on a broader, longer horizon out to 2050, and these are some of the long-term ambitions that 5-year plan will take us towards. So we have 4 main longer-term objectives, and these were actually co-created with our customers and other stakeholders over a period of time. So relevant to the theme of the conference, and a couple of things in here. One is that we want to enable the region to become resilient to the risks of drought and flooding, and I've heard it said before that if climate change is a shark, then water are the teeth in the shark's mouth. And what we're talking about here is either having not enough water to support people in terms of drinking water, in terms of there being enough water in the environment for the ecology, not enough water for the agricultural nature of the region, all incredibly important things, or having too much water. And we're just coming off the back of a record-breaking autumn and winter in the UK, and particularly in the east of England again, where we have broken almost every record in terms of how wet the winter has been. Well, I think 11 named storms over that period, and we've still got fields kind of underwater with standing water that aren't able to be put into kind of agricultural production at the moment. We're moving into May very shortly. But also they're a carbon neutral business by 2050 as well. We want to be net zero by 2030. We want to be completely carbon neutral by 2050. And then there are a number two there as well, enabling sustainable economic housing growth in the region. So we have got to manage our water resources in a way where we can enable growth, but sustainable growth within the region. And we want to work with others. And this is where I was saying, we've got to understand which elements that we can deliver and which elements we need to work with others to deliver. And working at a catchment scale across the region to deliver environmental improvements is an absolute must. Now, part of our role is to make sure that nothing that comes out of our systems, either intended or unintended, causes environmental harm. But we also need to work with others to understand, okay, particularly the agricultural community, how can we deliver the food resources that we need, but in a way which is not going to impact on our operations, so cause problems for us from the over application of nutrients or pesticides, but also doesn't cause kind of environmental degradation as well. So those are our long-term objectives, and we have a thing called a long-term delivery strategy, again on our website. If you want to have a look at it, it's a really interesting document which shows the direction of travel that we absolutely want to take. So I wanted to give you all of that as a bit of context, and now I'll kind of go back to introduce purpose in that context, but I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavour for how we are kind of approaching things at the strategic level from the position of purpose. So I mentioned that it was well over a decade, nearly 2 decades ago now, that we started to really understand that the challenges that we faced in the region, but also as an organisation, were too great for us to tackle taking a business as usual approach. And at that point in time, we really stopped thinking about, well, okay, what are the things that we are just responsible for, and how can we work kind of outside our traditional operational boundaries to ensure a much more successful outcome. And I think as an organisation, we've always considered ourselves to be working in the public interest. If you think about water is really a kind of, it's a natural resource which is at heart part of a kind of circular economy. As a water company, we take water from the environment, we treat it so that customers can drink it, or industry can use it. We then take it back from them, we treat it again so that it's fit to go back out into the ecosystem. So that's we understand that if that system isn't working, then fundamentally as a business we don't we don't have a future either. And the pressures of climate change and growth really made us think, okay, well, we need to think about how we work more collaboratively and take a greater role in wider society in order that kind of ultimate aim to be achieved. And that's what we were doing. And we abandoned having a separate kind of approach to sustainability and a separate approach to our business plan, and we brought those two things together. So we had a sustainable business plan to try and ensure that there wasn't antagonistic kind of activities going on, that everybody was aligned. But several years ago we went that next step, and our board decided and agreed that we would change our articles of association. So the core DNA, the constitution of the company. And in 2019, we changed those articles of association, and in short, put a purpose in there, which was around bringing environmental and social prosperity to the region we serve through our commitment to love every drop. And love every drop was the kind of, that was our road to Damascus thinking approach about being more than just a traditional business. So that was cemented into our Articles of Association in 2019. And in doing that, we changed our duties for our directors as well, so that they needed to consider the consequences of decisions in the long term, that they incorporated the interests of the company's employees, that we fostered good business relationships with suppliers and customers and other stakeholders, that we took into account the impact of the company's operations on the community and the environment, that we maintained as high a level of reputation in terms of high standards of business conduct, and we kind of balanced all of that out between all of the members and the interests in the company. So those things were changed back in 2019. But what we also said was that we wanted to adopt a statement of responsible business principles. So we wanted to be able to report against some kind of standard, some kind of approach. And when we made that decision, we had a look at what was kind of out there, what was on the market, and there really wasn't anything that we considered kind of fit for purpose that worked for us. And I know that during the conference you have already kind of heard about PAS 808, this British Standards Institute publicly available specification on purpose-driven organisations. So we got involved in that. We wanted to see whether we could kind of bring people together to co-create a set of principles that would work for us. And the long and the short of it, it did. And I'm sure you've heard this over the course of the 2 days. The ultimate aim of a purpose-driven company is to be thinking about the long-term well-being of all people and planet, and that's the kind of approach that we are trying to take and embed within the company. And again, those are those 4 overarching aims that I talked about earlier around net zero, around achieving significant improvements in ecological quality. So not about doing less harm, but actually creating a restorative approach, tackling the issues around climate change, but also enabling, the right level of sustainable growth within our region. So trying to push ourselves up that pyramid. And I won't go into the details of PAS 808, but what we've also been trying to do is use that to really test ourselves and evaluate ourselves against the 7 principles within that document. And we've gone through a process of kind of self-evaluation, and then we brought in the British Standards Institute to check that, validate it, and audit us against that approach. And that's been a really interesting activity over the last few months. Those are the kind of 7 principles there, and then we took that and interpreted it in terms of our organisation so that we could speak to the employees at every level of the company to understand how that was going to kind of come to life in various different departments, whether that's in the kind of operational part of the business or whether it's in one of the support services. And when we went through the process, we looked at, okay, which of those principles appear or should appear in different parts of our company, and what kind of evidence did we need to find to demonstrate that we were adhering to that principle and living the behaviours. And so we carried out a process to kind of, as I said, look at that internally, and we collected lots and lots of evidence, and our sustainability team then collated all of that and basically kind of gave us a kind of score on a maturity matrix, saying, well, if it wasn't, if we found no evidence at all, that was at one end of the scale. If it appeared in everywhere that we looked and was truly embedded and truly lived, then that was the other end of the scale. And then we took that findings to what's called our Sustainability Centre of Excellence. So that's the group of senior business leaders within the company who are responsible for delivering elements of sustainability and purpose. And then we said to them, okay, here's what we have found. We want you now to challenge us either up or down on that maturity grading. But if you're going to challenge us, you need to give us some evidence to say this is why we think it should be a lower grade than you've kind of given yourself, or if you think it should be better, here's the evidence that corroborates that. That was all done, and then we invited BSI in to come and independently look at all of the evidence we've collected, and then if they thought we were mature enough to then come and actually do a full audit on us. And that's what they did. They came and interviewed 35 people that they selected across the business, from our CEO and treasurer right the way through every department and down into our supply chain as well. And we'll shortly be releasing the results of that. I think it's on the 22nd of May. We'll be releasing a case study on that. But it was a really useful process to try and understand whether we had embedded the kind of decision-making processes, we were living the behaviours in a way that connected and gave direct line of sight up to that purpose about delivering environmental and social prosperity. So now I just wanted to move on to a couple of slides just to kind of bring that to life. So what does that look like in practice? So the first example, and I mentioned it in the headlines earlier on, was that, you know, we are getting to a position in the east of England where, because of the growing population and particularly because of climate change, but also because of an increasing requirement to leave more water in areas of the natural environment to ensure that they are resilient to climate change as well, we find ourselves in need of finding new water resources. And one of the ways of doing that is creating new reservoirs. So we have 2 new reservoirs that we're developing the plans for at the moment. Now, where does purpose come into that? Well, a purpose-based approach is to really think about reservoirs beyond the requirements that we have for them. So we know how to build a reservoir. We know how to capture water over the winter, to bring it into a location and store it, and then, you know, treat it and deliver it to our customers. We also know how to do that in a way that will, within that boundary, provide really interesting, exciting social opportunities, recreational opportunities, employment opportunities. And we know how to do it in a way that will deliver nationally and internationally important wildlife sites, because basically that's what our reservoirs have all become. They are all now protected with one form or another of kind of nature designation. But with these new reservoirs, what we were really interested in was, how can you go beyond that? And if you go back to the kind of regional challenges that I highlighted at the beginning, how can investing, you know, what will be upwards of £1 billion on a reservoir, how can that be used to support some of the other needs in the community? So if we're building a reservoir, how does that support the water needs for agriculture? How can that be used to support other environmental needs in the location? How can that provide even greater opportunities for you know, recreation activities? Can it link up navigation routes, those kind of things? So really, this is the approach we're trying to take with these 2 new reservoirs, because they are, you know, massive investments, and one that will only happen in every couple of generations. And some of the work that we've done into exploring this suggests that you know, if we could gain an additional, you know, £1 billion of investment, we think we could unlock another £5 billion of added value from an environmental and social perspective in the region. So that's the conversation that's going on at the moment. How can these reservoirs be an opportunity to deliver something that's a much greater systems benefit? So we're talking to all sorts of different organisations about that at the moment. Another one is on the kind of the water recycling, as we would call it, or kind of sewage treatment side of the business as well. So we have a lot of schemes that are looking at how we deliver better treatment and reduction in nutrients coming out of our treatment processes. And the traditional solution is very much around, okay, you would need to build something from an engineering perspective. We can do that in as sustainable a way as we possibly can do with low carbon concrete and recycled materials and various other things. But effectively, that would still be potentially something that has impact as well as giving benefit. What we are looking at doing, and what we have done in a number of areas now, is look for natural treatment solutions, so nature-based solutions. And this is a wetland creation at the back of one of our treatment works in Norfolk, which does exactly that. So working with local landowners, and you know, it does take a larger land footprint to deliver it. We're able to create something that gives the same outcome, so the same treatment benefit, but requires no energy, requires no concrete, no chemicals, and will deliver additional biodiversity benefits and social value benefits as well. And this required a lot of conversation with regulators to allow us to do this within the kind of regulatory framework that we've got to work within, but has been successful. And we are in the process of delivering another 34 of those, and hopefully many more as the business plan goes on. So again, that's kind of driven by our approach to challenge ourselves to say, okay, if we're thinking about the top of that triangle, if we're thinking about, you know, how we deliver well-being for the environment and society, can we do things in a different way? And no, it's not going to work in every situation, but can we think of nature first before we, you know, have to resort to a more traditional solution? And we're also involved in a lot of flood protection work as well. And again, that kind of thought there, you know, it is exactly the same. So a traditional solution on that left-hand side there, which is a hard engineering solution, or can we do something in a much more sustainable way through a kind of sustainable urban drainage perspective, or even can we really truly work with nature kind of upstream of where this flooding occurs to think about managing the landscape and working with others to manage the landscape. So a picture of a beaver, and we've been involved in some beaver reintroductions as experiments to alleviate, you know, the problems of people's houses flooding. So, you know, we've got to be really comfortable that these solutions will address the issue. But what's been very interesting over the period that we've seen is particularly wet weather. We have seen those areas with nature and natural based solutions functioning much more effectively and being able to deal with the extremes much more effectively. The other thing we've done is to work to make money go further. So we have a certain amount of investment that is within our business plan, but how can we work with others to try and deliver solutions that we can put our monies together, and rather than spend money on individual asset protection, can we do it that protects a much broader area? So, you know, that's definitely an approach that we'll be taking and trying to broaden as we move forward into the next kind of regulatory cycle. And I mentioned carbon as well. So, you know, this is something that we've been doing since 2010. We set ourselves a target in 2010 to say, could we halve the amount of carbon that gets built into the assets that we create in just 5 years? So by 2015, we were amazed, I think, at the ability that our supply chain had to work with us when we set a really hard target to achieve, and the innovation that was created was absolutely amazing. And we met that target, and then we've been pushing that target on every 5 years. And so last year, you know, the average asset we build built in that year was 63% less carbon when compared with a similar asset that was built in 2010. But we're also looking at things that go beyond that scope as well. So how can what we are doing on one of our sites contribute to something somebody might be doing in an adjacent site? And the picture on the right hand side there is how an enormous greenhouse, which is they're growing quite a large proportion of tomatoes for the UK market, is benefiting from excess kind of heat and CO2 coming from one of our operations. And so, that is taking one of our waste products, helping to generate something of value, which is preventing the need for tomatoes which have been grown elsewhere and shipped into the UK. So again, that's a kind of another, I guess, another way of thinking how we're building purpose into our thinking. And a question just to kind of end on is one that I get asked an awful lot. So, okay, when we're building a reservoir, well, yes, you can see how purpose is getting built into that kind of decision-making process. When we're creating other assets, you can think about how you take carbon out of that by designing it in a different way, or creating a new innovation, or not building something new at all and going for a nature-based solution. And we have an amazing kind of system now that we've built in called our 6 Capitals framework, which helps people in that infrastructure investment process to look at and evaluate the impacts on nature, on people, as in our people, our employees, on society, as well as thinking about intellectual capital, thinking about the money that we need to spend on it, and thinking about what assets are going to be created at the end of the day. And that's a process which works really, really well. And we use that to compare different options and then try and select the one which gives the greatest value within the financial constraints that we've got. So what we've done more recently, and this actually came directly out of the self-assessment against PAS 808, was to say, okay, how does everybody in the business is making a decision at some point in their kind of working day or their working week, and that doesn't matter whether they're in in our legal team, or in our HR team, or in procurement, or wherever they are. How can they be thinking about our purpose when they make that decision? So we pulled together a really simple light version of our 6 Capitals framework without any metrics attached to it, and we're not suggesting that we need to kind of track the delivery of those metrics, but we want to change the way people think. We want people's behavior to change as a result of that. So these are just an opportunity to think about, right, what impact will my decision have on nature? Is it doing the right thing for the environment? Will it support our zero pollutions mindset? How will I cut carbon through making that decision? We want people to think about the impact on our employees. So how will that decision make our employees happier, healthier, and safer? Does it allow people to do things right the first time? Is the decision being made in an inclusive way? What will it do to our customers? Will it make their day great? Will it help build trust? Will it deliver what customers expect of us? From an intellectual point of view, have we thought about all of the options? Could we do this in partnership in an innovative way? Have we checked to work out what's worked and what's failed in a similar scheme in the past? Have we got a tech opportunity? And then going back to the more traditional kind of manufactured and financial capitals, from an asset point of view, we need our assets to work brilliantly. So what impact will my decision have on our assets? And not just today, how will it impact on their resilience in the long term? And then obviously from a financial point of view, are we being efficient? Most of our work is now funded through sustainable finance initiatives. So how does it link into those? And how does it reduce our financial risk as well? Now, I'm not saying that everybody's decision every day will impact on all of those things, but what we want to do and what we are doing is getting everybody to think about this, to challenge themselves, and to really try and bring purpose into everybody's lives, so that nobody thinks, okay, delivering environmental and social prosperity is that person's job over there in that department. Because really, when it's all said and done, I think what we've learned is that it's everybody's responsibility. So I hope that's given a little bit of insight into how we're trying to deliver environmental prosperity and social prosperity in our region, and how we're bringing purpose into practice. And yeah, I'm really sorry that I'm not able to join you in person today, but if there are any questions that come out of this presentation, please do speak to the organisers, and they can pass them on to me, and I'll happily come back to you. And yeah, hope you're having a fantastic conference, and yeah, really hope you've enjoyed it and learnt a lot. Thanks very much.